The Loknar is a frigate class which served Starfleet during the middle of the 23rd century and was produced in three major variants between 2250 and 2270. The ships served until the dawn of the 24th century and were popular with their crews throughout their service lives. The Loknar measured in at 290 meters long, was 127 wide, and 56 meters tall. Depending on the specific variant, the ship was armed with 8 phaser banks and 2 torpedo launchers, with 1 forward and 1 aft. The ships could manage a maximum speed of warp factor 8, with a cruising speed of warp factor 6. With a crew of 173, the vessels were smaller than the contemporary Saladin-class destroyer, but larger than the Hermes-class scout. Their firepower, speed, and protection were similarly in between those two ships as well, though the Saladin was built to cruiser standards rather than the Saladin and Hermes, which were built to scout standards of construction, making the Loknar significantly sturdier and able to take much more of a beating than its sisters. The Loknar began its development during the 4 Years' War. In this conflict, it was realized quickly that Starfleet lacked enough cruisers to adequately control the Federation's frontiers, escort merchant ships, and fill out its battle fleets. While the scout ships previously used in many of these roles were found to be too lightly armed to engage any significant enemy warship and have a hope of success. While efforts to up-arm the scout would eventually lead to the creation of the destroyer, or the development of the pre-war Nelson-class scout, into the Saladin and Hermes-class destroyers and scout ship, respectively. A parallel Andorian development for a downsized cruiser would result in what would become the Loknar class. The concept for the Andorian design team that was working under was that the new destroyer, with its heavy torpedo armament, but weak shields and hull, would be best suited for work with the fleet as a scout and screening unit, as well as fast attack vessel. However, a similarly sized ship built to cruiser standards would be better suited for work away from the fleet. The first Loknar-class starships began entering service in 2246, a year and a half after the end of the 4 Years' War. The ships quickly proved themselves in border patrol, anti-piracy, presence missions, and light fleet duties, becoming popular with regional commanders and crews alike. Loknars would quickly become mainstays of Starfleet's presence throughout the Federation, freeing up larger cruisers for missions with the fleet or exploring, while also keeping the destroyers concentrated at starbases, where they could serve with the new Federation-class ships in a battle fleet. 3 major batches were built. The Batch 1 was built in the 2250s and was the initial production version. The Batch 2 was a minor update to this design, made in the 2260s using newer engines, shield generators, weapons, and sensors. And finally, the Batch 3 was in essence a new ship produced in the 2270s as part of the same program which produced the Constitution II and Miranda class. The ships remained in service throughout the 23rd century, though most had fallen from frontline uses by the early 2290s and were instead employed as training ships and transports. After retiring from Starfleet, several Loknars were transferred to continue to serve in fleets of Federation member worlds in law enforcement duties. Today, several ships have been preserved as museums, and a handful of the ships remain in service with various member nations' domestic naval forces. Now, before this video finishes, I think I should mention quickly that the history for the Loknar class in this video differs quite a bit from its original form. The Loknar dates from the FASA era of Trek gaming in the 1980s. During this era, before even TNG, nothing was known of the era before the original series. So, the writers made up their own backstory that differed significantly from what would later be established. Perhaps the biggest difference between the history I did in this video and its official backstory is that the original versions of the Loknar were armed with lasers and mass accelerator cannon, it being thought that phasers and photon torpedoes were a fairly recent innovation at the time of the original Enterprise's 5-year mission. Later Trek series would throw much of this lore out the airlock, and Discovery would firmly shatter it. But that's neither here nor there. Anyways, I decided to go my own way with the lore for this video to make it sort of fit into established canon, for all the good that is, as established Trek canon is basically a lob of spaghetti thrown into, well, more spaghetti. It's a tangled mess. That's what I'm getting at with this bad analogy. If you do like the video, then do all the normal stuff real YouTubers are always on about you doing. Commenting, liking, subscribing, all of that stuff. Turn the little bell. Do all that, definitely. And also have a good day.